That evening, Jennifer stayed late in the office, scrutinizing every detail. She cross-checked her work, making sure every document was accurate, leaving nothing to chance. Outside, the city lights flickered, casting a soft glow through the window. As the hours ticked by, she felt a quiet resolve begin to grow within her. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Jennifer Parker knew she wasn't ready to back down. The city lights sparkled outside her window, their twinkling a sharp contrast to the growing unease that settled within the foundation. As the hours passed, Jennifer Parker sat in the quiet of her office, the weight of suspicion pressing on her. The distant sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by a soft knock at the door. She looked up, and there stood Nicholas Hunter, his expression filled with concern. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. Jennifer offered a tired smile, though it barely reached her eyes. "Just trying to stay on top of things," she replied, though the exhaustion in her tone told a different story. Nicholas entered, his gray eyes scanning the room, narrowing as he took in her tired appearance. "You've been under a lot of pressure lately, Jennifer," he said, his voice steady. "More than you should be." "I'm managing," she answered, but her voice betrayed the lie, sounding more fragile than she'd intended. Nicholas crossed his arms, leaning against the edge of her desk. "Jennifer, if something's going on, you need to tell me. I can't help if I don't know what's happening." For a moment, Jennifer thought about confiding in him. The urge to tell him everything, the mounting pressure, the threats, the fear, was strong, but Henry's warning to remain discreet lingered in her mind. She shook her head instead. "It's nothing I can't handle." Nicholas didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. "Just remember," he said softly, his voice full of quiet reassurance. "You're not alone in this. I've been where you are, feeling like the walls are closing in, but you're stronger than you think." Jennifer nodded, grateful for his support, but still holding back the full truth. She appreciated his concern, but there was something inside her telling her to face this battle alone for now. The next morning, Jennifer received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was low and distorted, clearly altered to hide the speaker's identity. "You're getting too close to something you don't understand," the voice warned, cold and menacing. "If you know what's good for you, you'll walk away." Jennifer's blood ran cold at the words. The call was short and ended abruptly, the line going dead before she could even reply. She sat frozen, the phone still pressed against her ear, her heart racing in her chest. Whoever was behind the attacks wasn't trying to hide anymore. They wanted her to know she was the target. But instead of succumbing to fear, Jennifer felt her resolve harden. The call didn't intimidate her. It fueled her determination. She walked back into the office that day with a new sense of purpose, her focus sharper than it had ever been. If someone thought they could scare her off, they clearly didn't know her. By the end of the week, Jennifer had begun her own investigation into the sabotage. She quietly documented every irregularity, noting down anything that seemed out of place. Soon, she enlisted Dennis's help, and together they formed a partnership based on trust. Each new discovery only steeled her resolve further. She would not let them win. One evening, as Jennifer Parker sifted through files in her office, something caught her eye that made her blood run cold. It was a memo from Jared Rivera, one of Nicholas Hunter's most trusted business associates, sent to an external consultant. The language was vague, but the implications were unmistakable. The financial dealings hinted at in the document were in direct opposition to the stated mission of the foundation. Jennifer's heart raced as she processed what she was reading. This wasn't just a small oversight. Jared wasn't simply undermining her. He was betraying Nicholas. She grabbed her phone, her hand trembling as she dialed Dennis's number. "We need to tell Nicholas," she said, urgency cutting through her words. Now. This is bigger than I thought. Dennis's voice was steady but firm as he replied, Not yet. We need more than just this. If we alert him too soon, we risk giving ourselves away. Let's gather more evidence first. We need something irrefutable. Jennifer nodded, though the weight of the discovery felt like a stone in her chest. She couldn't comprehend how someone so close to Nicholas could do something like this. What had started as a simple attempt to prove herself now felt like a much larger, more dangerous game. The stakes had risen, and she was in the middle of it. As the night deepened, the office lights dimmed, and Jennifer found herself sitting alone at her desk. The buzz of the city outside was a faint hum, but in her office, it felt like the walls were closing in. The road ahead seemed impossibly long, but there was no turning back now. The fire lit within her. She had come too far to back down. But the discovery about Jared Rivera weighed on Jennifer like a looming storm. The realization that someone Nicholas trusted so deeply could be working against him was jarring, unsettling in a way she hadn't expected. In the days that followed, Jennifer tread carefully. Her exchanges with Jared were cordial but distant, while she and Dennis worked diligently to piece together the truth behind his actions. Dennis, always the steady presence, moved with a kind of discreet precision that only came from years of loyalty. He slipped into offices after hours, retrieved files, and followed trails that others might have missed. Meanwhile, Jennifer immersed herself in uncovering every piece of the puzzle. She cross-referenced emails, tracked financial statements, and pored over any information she could find, driven by a single thought. She would expose the full extent of Jared's betrayal. Jennifer had spent days poring over documents, cross-referencing emails, and slowly putting together the pieces of Jared Rivera's betrayal. It wasn't just a personal blow. It was a direct threat to the Foundation's integrity, jeopardizing everything they had worked so hard to build. What Jared had done had the potential to undo all the good the Foundation had accomplished, and Jennifer knew she had to act swiftly. As she sifted through yet another pile of reports one evening, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just months ago, she had been serving coffee in Tyringham's small diner, struggling to balance nursing classes and pay her bills. Now, she found herself embroiled in a conflict that tested her courage, her principles, and her every decision. Her phone buzzed suddenly, cutting through her thoughts. A text from Dennis read, "Meeting room 4A, 10 minutes. A wave of apprehension washed over her, but she pushed it aside, quickly gathering the notes she'd been working on. She made her way to the designated room where Dennis was waiting for her. His usually composed face was now clouded with concern. "What is it?" Jennifer asked as she closed the door behind her. Dennis slid a file across the table, his expression grim. "I think we have what we need. These documents tie Jared directly to suspicious financial activities. He's been funneling money into a private account disguised as consulting fees." Jennifer's eyes scanned the papers in front of her. The evidence was overwhelming. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated attempt to undermine everything they stood for. The implications were devastating. It meant they would have to confront Jared and eventually Nicholas. "We have to tell Nicholas," Jennifer said quietly but firmly, her voice steady despite the rising tide of dread in her chest. Dennis nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I agree. But we need to be careful. Jared has been by his side for years, through some of the toughest times. This will hit him hard." Jennifer swallowed, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll handle it carefully. Nicholas deserves the truth, but he also needs to know we have his back." The opportunity came faster than they expected. The next morning, Nicholas called a staff meeting to discuss upcoming initiatives. As the team gathered in the boardroom, the air was thick with tension, though Nicholas seemed completely unaware of the undercurrent of unease that ran through the room. Jared sat across from Jennifer, his usual air of confidence masking the unease that simmered beneath. He wore a faint, self-assured smile, like a man who felt untouchable. Jennifer exchanged a glance with Dennis, who gave her a barely noticeable nod, her signal to proceed. When the conversation shifted to the foundation's financial stability, Jennifer seized the moment. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but her voice didn't waver. "Nicholas," she began, the words firm despite the nervous coil in her stomach. "There's something we need to address. It's about the foundation's accounts." Nicholas's brow furrowed, his sharp gaze fixated on Jennifer. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Jennifer hesitated for a moment before she steeled herself. "Dennis and I have found evidence that suggests funds are being misused, and it looks like someone in a senior position is behind it." The room fell silent, every eye in the room now on Jennifer. Jared's confident smile faltered, a flicker of unease flashing across his face. Nicholas leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Who is it?" Jennifer took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. "Jared Rivera." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by an uncomfortable silence. Jared quickly regained his composure, his face hardening. "This is a serious accusation," he said with cold disdain. "I hope you have evidence to back it up." "We do," Dennis chimed in, placing a thick folder onto the table. "These documents outline the suspicious transactions. The funds were funneled into a private account under the guise of consulting fees." Nicholas flipped open the folder, his jaw tightening as he scanned the pages. The tension in the room grew unbearable as everyone waited for the truth to sink in. Jared's calm demeanor began to crack. "This is a misunderstanding," he protested. "Those funds were for legitimate expenses, consulting fees. I can explain." "Enough," Nicholas snapped, his tone sharp. He closed the file with a finality that seemed to hang in the air. "I trusted you, Jared. For years, I trusted you. And this is how you repay me?" Jared faltered, his usual bravado slipping away, replaced by a look of guilt. The room was thick with silence, everyone absorbing the weight of what had just been revealed. I can explain," Jared began again, but Nicholas cut him off. "No," Nicholas interrupted, his voice cold as ice. "I've heard enough." The meeting ended abruptly, and Nicholas dismissed the staff with a wave of his hand. Security was called in to escort Jared out. Jennifer stayed behind, watching as Nicholas remained by the window, his shoulders tense with emotion. "Nicholas," Jennifer said softly, stepping closer to him. He didn't turn to face her, but his voice carried the heavy burden of his pain. "Don't apologize. You did the right thing. It's just hard to accept that someone I considered a friend would betray me like this." Jennifer paused for a moment, then placed a hand gently on his arm. "You're not alone in this. We'll get through it." Nicholas finally turned to her, his eyes weary but filled with a flicker of gratitude. "Thank you, Jennifer, for everything." As Jennifer left the office later that evening, a strange mix of relief and exhaustion washed over her. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, she felt a sense of victory, not just for herself, but for the foundation and all the good it stood for. The fallout from Jared Rivera's exposure spread through the foundation like a gust of cold wind. His abrupt departure left a palpable emptiness, but it also brought to the surface troubling questions and uncertainties that couldn't be overlooked. For days, Nicholas threw himself into his work, collaborating tirelessly with his legal team to assess the damage. He combed through financial reports and dealt with the fallout from donors and partners. The weight of it all was clear in the way the lines around his eyes had deepened and the sharpness of his tone during meetings. Meanwhile, Jennifer found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, While there was some relief in knowing the truth had finally come to light, an uneasy feeling lingered. Jared's betrayal had gone beyond the professional realm. It was deeply personal for Nicholas. One late evening, as Jennifer was wrapping up her work in her office, Dennis stepped into the doorway. His face was pensive, his expression thoughtful. "You've done well, Miss Parker," he said, stepping closer. "Not many would have had the courage to bring this to light." Jennifer looked up from her notes, offering a faint smile. "I didn't do it alone. You and Nicholas, you've both carried the burden far more than I have." Dennis shook his head gently. "Don't downplay your role. It was your persistence, your refusal to back down, that made the difference." Jennifer set her pen down, her gaze drifting toward the city lights twinkling in the distance. "Do you think he'll be okay? Nicholas, I mean?" Dennis's expression softened. "Nicholas has weathered worse storms, but this one will leave a mark. Jared wasn't just a colleague. He was someone Nicholas trusted completely. Losing that kind of trust, it changes a person." Jennifer nodded, feeling a tightness in her chest. Over the past few weeks, she had seen glimpses of Nicholas's vulnerability, moments when the weight of his responsibilities seemed almost unbearable. He masked his pain with an armor of strength, but Jennifer could sense the cracks beneath the surface. The next day, Nicholas called a staff meeting to address the team. His commanding presence, as always, immediately drew the room's attention, but there was a somberness to his tone as he began to speak. "I want to thank all of you for your dedication and hard work during this difficult time," he said, his gray eyes scanning the room. "The foundation has faced challenges before, but this was a betrayal I didn't see coming." He paused, steadying himself before continuing. "I want to be clear. Our work will continue. We won't let this derail the mission we've built together." Jennifer felt a swell of admiration for him as he spoke. Despite the turmoil, his determination shone through. As the meeting concluded, Jennifer lingered in the boardroom, gathering her notes. Nicholas approached her, his expression weary but sincere. "Jennifer," he said quietly, his voice softening now that the room had emptied. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Jennifer looked up from her papers, setting her notes aside as she nodded. "Of course." Nicholas hesitated for a moment, running a hand through his dark hair, his gaze fixed on the floor before meeting hers. "I owe you an apology. I put you in a position you never should have been in. Jared's actions, they weren't your burden to bear." Jennifer shook her head, meeting his eyes with quiet understanding. "You don't have to apologize, Nicholas. I wanted to help, and I'm glad I could." His expression softened, and a flicker of gratitude appeared in his eyes. "You've done more than help, Jennifer. You've reminded me of what this foundation is really about. It's easy to forget when you're surrounded by people like Jared." The weight of his words settled between them, unspoken yet deeply understood. Jennifer reached out, her hand brushing against his arm in a gesture of quiet support. "You haven't lost sight of it, Nicholas. That's why this place exists. That's why all of us are here." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," he said simply. As the days turned into weeks, the foundation slowly regained its momentum. Jennifer immersed herself in her work, collaborating with Dennis and the team to roll out the Rural Clinic initiative. The project quickly gained traction, receiving praise from both donors and the communities it aimed to serve. For the first time since arriving, Jennifer felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, a validation of her place in this world. But even as progress continued, a sense of unease lingered. Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that Jared's betrayal was merely a part of something larger, something still hidden beneath the surface. One late evening, as she pored over old reports, Jennifer stumbled upon an email chain that raised her suspicions. The messages were cryptic, but they suggested that Jared hadn't acted alone. A A chill swept through her as the implications began to settle in. If Jared had accomplices, both the Foundation and Nicholas were still at risk. Jennifer wrestled with whether to share her findings with Dennis or Nicholas, but something held her back. Without concrete evidence, she feared stirring up even more tension in an already strained environment. Instead, she called Julia, her voice tight with unease. "I can't shake the feeling there's more to this," Jennifer admitted, pacing her small apartment. "Every time I think I've gotten to the bottom of it, there's something else." Julia's voice was firm on the other end of the line. "Then keep digging, Em. If anyone can figure this out, it's you. Just be careful. People like Jarrett don't go down without a fight." Jennifer nodded, a newfound resolve hardening within her. She didn't know where this path would lead, but one thing was certain: she couldn't stop now. For Nicholas, for the Foundation, and for herself, she would see it through. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Foundation's building, casting long, delicate streaks across the polished floors. Jennifer walked briskly to her office, her thoughts swirling around the cryptic emails she had uncovered the night before. The atmosphere in the building felt unusually heavy, as if the weight of Alan's betrayal still hung in the air. Though much of the team had rallied behind Nicholas's steady leadership, a lingering sense of unease clung to the corridors, a quiet dread that there might be more secrets yet to uncover. Jennifer placed her bag down on her desk and immediately reached for the files she had been reviewing. At the top of the stack were the emails she had found, their vague references to secured interests and off-the-record dealings only raising more questions than providing answers. She had traced the sender's address through internal directories, but the trail ended abruptly at an unfamiliar name, Zoe Castillo, listed as a consultant for a brief period the previous year. Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. Who was this, and how was she connected to Jared? Wondering this, she directed the laptop to find transcripts from the meeting. "Morning," Dennis's voice broke into her thoughts. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his gaze calm but sharp as usual. "You look like you've been burning the midnight oil," he commented, his tone gentle but perceptive. Jennifer gave a tired smile, gesturing to the mountain of papers before her. "I think I've found something, but it's incomplete. There's a name, Zoe Castillo, and some vague references that suggest Jarrett wasn't working alone." Dennis's brow furrowed as he stepped into the office, his sharp eyes scanning the documents. The top sheet caught Dennis's attention. He studied the paper for a moment, then spoke, his voice steady but concerned. "This complicates things," he muttered. "If Jared had support, then the sabotage runs deeper than we thought." Jennifer nodded, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her desk. "I want to bring this to Nicholas, but I don't want to cause unnecessary panic without more solid proof. What do you think?" Dennis paused, considering her words. His calm demeanor was a source of comfort in the midst of uncertainty. "Nicholas deserves to know, but you're right to be cautious. If there's more to this, we need to gather all the pieces before we act." Jennifer exhaled slowly, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on her. "I'll keep searching. There has to be more to uncover." Dennis gave her a reassuring nod. "You're on the right path, Jennifer, and remember, you're not in this alone." The hours passed as Jennifer delved deeper into the Foundation's archives. She sifted through contracts, financial reports, and personnel files, determined to find any link that could connect Zoe Castillo to Jared's schemes. The noise of the office faded into the background as she became absorbed in her search. She was relentless, piecing together clues and pushing forward despite the growing sense of urgency. Then, late in the afternoon, she found it. Buried in a pile of unrelated documents, a memo caught her attention. Zoe's signature was at the bottom, with the initials J.R. Jared Rivera. The memo detailed a plan to reallocate Foundation funds into a third-party account. The wording was vague, But Jennifer didn't need further explanation. It was clear to her. This was the proof she had been searching for. Her pulse quickened as she carefully copied the memo and tucked the original back into the file. This was the evidence she needed to present to Nicholas, to show him that Jared hadn't been working alone. Just as she was preparing to leave for the day, Jennifer's phone buzzed on the desk. The unfamiliar number made her hesitate. Then, after a moment, she answered. "Hello, Miss Parker," a smooth, unfamiliar voice greeted her. "You've been busy." Jennifer's heart skipped a beat, her grip tightening on the phone. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Someone who knows when to stay out of other people's business," the voice replied, a hint of menace underlying the calm tone. "I suggest you do the same. It's for your own good." Before she could respond, the line went dead, leaving Jennifer frozen, staring at the screen in disbelief. The vague warning sent a cold shiver down her spine. Whoever was behind the sabotage knew she was getting closer to the truth, and they were not afraid to threaten her. End of Chapter 8. That evening, as Jennifer sat in her apartment, the weight of the memo and the anonymous threat gnawed at her. She spread the document out on the table, her mind racing. Sleep eluded her. Unable to calm her thoughts, she called Julia, her voice trembling as she recounted everything that had happened that day. "This is serious, Jennifer," Julia said, her tone sharp with concern. "You need to tell Nicholas. Now." "I know," Jennifer replied, her throat tight. "But what if this just makes things worse? What if—" "No what ifs," Julia interrupted firmly. "You've worked too hard to back down now. Nicholas needs to know the truth, no matter how messy it gets." Jennifer nodded, even though Julia couldn't see her. "You're right. I'll tell him tomorrow." The following morning, Jennifer walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The memo and her notes were firmly in hand, and she was prepared for whatever consequences the day might bring. When she knocked on Nicholas's office door, she found him sitting at his desk, focused on something in front of him. His demeanor softened as he looked up and saw her. "Jennifer," he greeted, gesturing for her to come in. "What's on your mind?" Jennifer closed the door behind her and placed the memo down in front of him. "I found this," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's from Zoe Castillo. It links her to Jared, showing they diverted funds." Nicholas took the memo, his brow furrowing as he read through it. "This is damning," he muttered, his voice low with concern. "Are you absolutely sure there's no mistake? Do you think it's impossible for us to fail this test?" Benish asked. "I've double-checked everything," Jennifer replied, her tone unwavering. "There's more, Nicholas. Yesterday I received a threat. Someone told me to stop investigating." Nicholas's jaw clenched, and his eyes darkened with anger. "This isn't just about the Foundation anymore. It's about protecting everyone, especially you." For the first time, Jennifer noticed the vulnerability in Nicholas's expression, mirroring the anxiety she herself had been carrying. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, but the nagging feeling in Jennifer's chest told her the worst was yet to come. The next day, a heavy silence hung over the Foundation, though the halls buzzed with the undercurrent of tension. Jennifer sat in her office, anxiously awaiting whatever would come next. Nicholas had called an emergency meeting, and she had yet to learn what the fallout would be. By midday, she was summoned to his office. The blinds were drawn, and Nicholas's usual composure seemed to have hardened into something more serious. Dennis stood nearby, his posture watchful but calm. "I've shared the memo with our legal team," Nicholas began, his voice grave. "They're looking into Zoe Castillo's connections. This is bigger than I thought, and I appreciate everything you've done." Jennifer clasped her hands tightly in her lap, her nerves barely held in check. "I just want to ensure the Foundation's safety and that the people we're helping don't end up suffering because of this." Nicholas's expression softened just a fraction, though the weight of the situation remained. "We'll get through this," he assured her. "But there's more. Zoe was seen meeting with a whistleblower. If she decides to involve the press, this could escalate quickly. Jennifer felt a chill race down her spine. What should we do? For now we wait, Nicholas said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. Our team is tracking her movements and preparing a statement if needed. But you need to be cautious, Jennifer. Dennis stepped forward, his tone serious. We're taking precautions, but stay alert. If anything feels off, don't hesitate to reach out immediately. Jennifer nodded, her heart pounding as she processed the weight of their conversation. There was no turning back now. The battle was just beginning. That evening, Jennifer returned to her apartment, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily on her chest. As she sipped her tea, the quiet solitude was broken by the buzz of an incoming call. Her stomach knotted as she glanced at the unknown number on the screen. "Hello," she answered, her voice betraying the anxiety that had taken root within her. "Miss Parker?" came the cold, calm voice on the other end. "You didn't heed my warning." Her pulse quickened, and she fought to steady her breath. "Who is this? What do you want?" "Stay out of matters that don't concern you," the voice replied. "Walk away while you still can." Before Jennifer could respond, the line went dead. She sat in stunned silence, the fear that had gripped her giving way to defiance. Whoever this person was, they clearly underestimated her resolve. She wasn't about to back down. Effortlessly, every word of the email came out of the website. The next morning, Nicholas sat across from Dennis, his fists clenched, his usual composed demeanor shaken. "This has gone too far," he said, his voice low but steady with resolve. "We need to expose whoever's behind this before they can cause any more damage." Dennis nodded solemnly, his expression unwavering. "Agreed. But we have to be cautious. If they're making threats, it's likely to escalate if we corner them." Jennifer watched them, her resolve solidifying with each passing moment. "I'll do whatever it takes to help," she said firmly, meeting both of their gazes. "But I refuse to live in fear." Nicholas's eyes softened slightly as he met her determined look. "I admire your courage, Jennifer," he said, his voice steady, "but I won't let you face this alone. We'll get through this together." As the day wore on, the Foundation's team worked tirelessly to connect the dots between Zoe, Jared, and their unknown accomplices. Jennifer spent hours combing through files, her determination unyielding despite the constant weight of the threats hanging over her head. By evening, there was a breakthrough. One of the legal team members uncovered a bank statement linking Zoe to an offshore account, one tied directly to Bruce Patel, a well-known corporate rival of Nicholas's. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. "This proves it," Jennifer said, her voice calm yet tinged with the emotion that surged beneath the surface. "They've been working together to bring you down." Nicholas nodded, the mix of relief and determination evident in his expression. "It's time to make this public," he said with conviction. "We need to show the world what's really happening and make it clear that we won't be silenced."